Happy Halloween.
Today I'm drinking LaCroix apricot and some like probiotic stuff I got at the store because I've been eating too much Halloween candy. Welcome to a very special episode of Manga
Wednesdays.
We'll be recommending you 5 manga to read this Halloween. I'm joined by my guest, Blue Breed, who's also a fan of horror manga. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi guys, I'm Blue Breed. I'm a hentai artist for a living, and I've also recently gone into reading more psychological based horror manga as well. I don't have a whole lot of time to read it, but the few that I have managed to read over the past couple of months have been really decent, and I'd like to talk about them with you guys today.
I feel like we've got sort of a history with the horror genre because we once marathoned all of the Saw movies, and that was like the first time. I didn't really like horror movies at all until I, for some reason, really got into those.
I used to, the Saw movies, yeah, because of that very hangout and whatnot when we watched all of them, that series used to be like my favorite friggin' modern horror series and whatnot, and the first one I still do think holds up pretty well. Maybe the second one too, but I can't really remember like where that series starts to jump the shark in terms of just becoming like torture porn. And then there's the recent one that came out, Jigsaw, and I haven't seen that one either.
I haven't either. I didn't really. I was like, they super ended the series already, so I can't imagine it's anything but more retcons or more like callbacks.
The actual Jigsaw died like fucking 4 movies ago.
Yeah. I mean, I sort of get I mean, I don't know. They definitely went into his past already. It's been so beaten to death. But yes, let's get into it. First story is Emerging by Hokazono Masaya. Masaya Hokazono? It's probably the other way around, yeah. In 2016, which I don't believe because this guy's like 60 years old and this looks dated, so I'm gonna say it's not actually from 2016. That or he just has been maintained that style from since then, but doesn't matter. The point is, it's from before this year, but it's very topical because it's about a virus that breaks out in Asia, and the government like represses it because they're like, oh god, no, nobody, like, the whole theme is that if people know that this virus came from Japan, they'll think less of Japan as a country and they'll blame them for the ensuing pandemic. And so it's like about these doctors trying to get it under control as quickly as possible to like maintain that like it didn't happen. So it has its typical manga tropes, like the girl who's horny for the Ebola virus and wants to discover this thing because she's like, that's what she's all about. Then you have like the super cool doctor who's like the expert. Then you have like the novice guy who's just like freaking out. But the whole thing is very time sensitive, so what makes it scary to me is like every day they can only do so much as doctors and they have to wait for test results to come back. But then the people in real time are like spreading this virus. It was also really interesting to me because it's definitely an older manga that they were able to speak to so much that we're seeing now, like the country trying to hide this thing because they don't want to lose face, which is so scary, but it's like definitely something to be concerned about.
And you said it came out in 2016?
Yeah, and then like the way in this story the CEOs talk to the doctors, they're like, we don't have a virus. Like they don't want to hear it or like be a part of it or like let this be known, so the doctors have to like do it for their own goodwill also. And they take it really seriously.
It's insane.
Yeah, it's only like 2 volumes, and like it touches on a lot of things that are very like I didn't even think about until this happened in real life, and like it's really interesting to like read that. It's very anxiety inducing.
I can imagine, because like you said, it's a very time-sensitive thing, and they're trying to control not only how many people are getting infected, but also trying to actively create a vaccine while being covert. So they can't just ask for help, because that could risk more people knowing about it. Let's see here. My first manga that I'm going to talk about is called Chi no Wadachi, and in English it's known as both A Trail of Blood and Blood on the Tracks. Both the manga that I'm talking about this session are going to be by the same author, who is Shuzo Oshimi. Shuzo is his work is still pretty like under grade, under wraps. You don't really hear his name very much, but he hasn't made as much as some others. But regardless, Oshimi's work is primarily psychological, and he likes to write more about coming of age type stories about young men and all that mess. Just things you would assume he's kind of been through personally, just his philosophies about growing up and coming of age. And a big thing for me when it comes to storytelling is the art direction. That's what intrigues me to check something out at very least. I've read what I believe is the entire story. It was released in February of 2017, and it's still going, quote unquote. I'll get more into that later. But essentially, Trail of Blood, it's about this boy named Seiichi, and one day he has a very specific relationship with his mother. You know, he's kind of a mama's boy, for lack of better terms. He's very close to her, and all of his friends and family notice that. They make fun of him very often. So one day, Seiichi and his family decide to do a group family trip to a hike trail, and they end up going on this hike. And during this hike, his cousin ends up making fun of him for being a mama's boy, and the mother, you can see, takes notice of this, and she doesn't do anything, but you can see through the panels that she's taking notice of this fact. And so eventually this cousin who made fun of him ends up convincing Seiichi to come with him to go friggin' look on the side of this cliff because it has a good view. I believe one of them needed to use the bathroom and the other came, but they end up getting entranced by the view from the cliff they went to. And then the mother breaks off from the group and goes to find them because she's wondering where they've been. They've been gone for a while now. And she sees the cousin. The cousin turns around because he was spooked by the mother coming out of nowhere and is about to fall off this cliff when the mother, whose name is Seiko, by the way, she catches him before he can fall off the cliff. But you see this kind of back view from her, and you see the face of the kid looking up at her, and he's freaked out. Not freaked out per se, but just kind of you can feel a tension in the way his face is drawn as he's looking up at her. And Seiichi, her son, is watching from a distance because he jumped away from the side of the cliff in order to make sure he doesn't also fall over. As he's watching this, the mother pushes his cousin off the cliff.
Oh my god.
What Oshimi likes to do with his manga is he likes to just take up entire friggin' pages, at least half, and just give them this awful feeling of dread, and you feel like you're watching this shit happen in slow motion. And the way he draws expressions and faces is just so mesmerizing. Seiichi, when the family finds out about the cousin friggin' falling off the cliff, because of course they're on this hike and all of a sudden they hear screaming and they friggin' come, his mother, instead of telling the truth, immediately breaks down and acts and tells a story about how the cousin was brash and she was telling him not to dance around on the side of the cliff, and he ends up falling, but she didn't catch him in time.
Wow, and the son watched her do that.
And because
that's got to be horrible for him to watch her do this.
Oh yeah, that's where the whole psychological writing of Oshimi really comes to light, because Seiichi, when he's questioned about this as well by the freaked out family members, he lies for her and helps her cover stuff up because he's a mama's boy, so he loves his mom, and he knows that in his naivete she would get arrested or something if they friggin' realized she tried to murder the cousin for being a little shit. So Seiichi helps keep his mother's crime under wraps. And here's the thing, the cousin did not die. He's actually been paralyzed. They found his body and he's recovering in the hospital as the manga progresses.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so he's still alive. Now he's his eyes are friggin' his eyes are like pointed away from one another. He's paralyzed. He's like hurt for sure, but he's incapacitated. He can't tell the truth or anything like that. Seiichi's father is always going over to the hospital with his aunt and uncle to check up on his cousin, see how he's doing and whatnot, because there's a chance that his cousin could pull through and completely recover. So they want to be there for moral support and all that. And every time he offers for Seiichi and his mother to go, the mother doesn't want to go and visit the cousin. And of course we know why that is, but of course because of her lie about how she wasn't able to save him, they write it off as she feels guilty for not being able to save the cousin. So she's kind of told like the perfect story in a sense. Seiichi starts to realize, I love my mom, but I also have my own direction in all this mess. And the story primarily delves into how you love your family and all that mess, and you kind of grow up with this perception of them. But as you start to go in more of your own direction, you also start to break that perception you had of them. We grow up essentially seeing our parents and our parental figures as these like supermen, these superheroes that are kind of infallible, and they do everything for a reason when they're just as fallible and human as anyone else as ourselves.
It's a really good point. Making that switch, especially during a time of crisis like this, sounds really horrifying.
Yeah, oh god, this is why I've kind of fallen in love with Oshimi's work. I love shit like this that kind of makes you question a lot of the things that you went through growing up, and this really does a good job of kind of showing, if you loved your parents enough and you were like a naive kid, like would you do the same thing, or would you try to fall in line with their lie because they're your mother and like they know what's best, so obviously if they're lying about this you should too.
It's a really interesting direction, because usually when the killer has someone on their side, whether it be a family member or somebody, that person will usually help the killer out in some way or end up being a companion or like the next killer when the killer dies or something to that effect. But for them to like kind of say, no, this is wrong, especially like starting from that position in the story, is a really interesting way to handle it.
Oh yeah, that's kind of the genius behind like this setup, because you have a kid who is a mama's boy and like he's made fun of it by others and he can't understand why, but now that we see like now that he has that shell of perfection of his mom broken, he can probably start to understand like why so many people think being super close to your family like that is kind of a weird thing. Early on in the story, Seiichi gets a love letter from a girl, and I have some panels from this moment, because the mother, of course, she checks the mail and she sees the love letter and she essentially brings it to him, and you can kind of see Seiko's face, and you can really see a lot about her feelings towards this situation and the way he drew her expression. Just the way he fucking notched her teeth gave her these eyelids that kind of make you feel like, oh, she's really pretending to be happy, but she's really pissed underneath those eyes.
Yeah, like unless she was an actual perfect person, this would be really suspicious.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what's fucked about this situation, is because Seiichi, up until this point, that's the only way he viewed her. And so we understand what she's up to, but he doesn't, because he's still coming to terms with how he feels about her now that he's kind of seen that she's capable of this. And because she's so possessive, she chooses to read the love letter for him, because of course for all she knows he's written to somebody to fucking tell on her or something, and she has these faces when reading it, and you can tell from like her eyes and whatnot. Now we know that the reason she's reading this is probably to keep tabs on him, to make sure he's not telling on her or anything like that. but because she's his mother and she has this upper hand on his psychology, she's able to essentially play to his emotions and act like the reason she's sad in this panel is because she's his mother and he's growing up so fast. He's got his first love letter and all this mess. She's able to play off.
Say that because my first response to seeing this was, this looks really insincere.
Right, exactly. Because you can see while she's reading it, she has this face that seems super intense. She kind of seems like she's really looking at it, trying to analyze whatever could be possibly being said. But then once she realizes what it is, she just kind of starts playing up this sad act with her eyes. So she reads this love letter, and she essentially tells Oshimi to reject her. But because Seiichi is such a child at the moment, he can't understand. He thinks that the reason that she wants that is because, she's a mom and she's scared that, he'll friggin' stop spending time with her and all that mess. And that's kind of the crazy thing about this, is she's kind of really, you can tell she really knows how to control people, or at least him, to that degree. So, as the story progresses, he actually chooses to go against his mom and actually start seeing this girl more after school, and they start hanging out. But because they've started hanging out more, of course, he's starting to come home later, and his mom is questioning that fact, which ends up leading to probably the best fucking piece of artwork, in my opinion, from this manga, and the part that really fucking freaked me out, which was when he came home really late one day. It was dark out, and his mom wasn't home, and he was trying to go to bed and all that mess, but then all of a sudden he hears the door being messed with, the front door, and he goes to answer it, only to, before he can even get to the door, his mother comes home, and we never see her face. We see this hatched fucking abomination as she's coming through the door. You start to see that there's more to this than just she's a crazy bitch, essentially. You start to see motive. She barges in, and she's you can tell she's pissed off without even seeing her face, and she gives him a knife and asks him to hold it to her neck and to make her disappear. And of course, this is his mom, he's not gonna do that. And so she says, well, then I guess I'll make you disappear. And so she begins strangling him. But she stops, and I believe she calls him pathetic or something like that. She essentially dismisses him and goes back to her room and pretends like none of this ever happened.
Oh my god.
Before she strangles him, she questions where he was and who he was with and if he was with the girl. And that's where my favorite panel comes in, which is this. As she looks at him with only the street lights lighting her face, and just, oh my god, just how little you can see of her face. You can tell she's so pissed, holding back all of her friggin' rage.
Wow, I didn't expect this to be so much about the mom, because it's not typically not that wouldn't be a villain, but this feels like a more interesting, or a really interesting character portrait of the mom for sure. Again, in Western media, I feel like we get this story sometimes with the psycho mom or parent, but it's not that deep. It doesn't really have much to it. This is a little bit more thoughtful.
Oh yeah, you can tell that Oshimi really put a lot of work into considering motivations, how the power that a parent has over their kids, and how that power can be abused, if the parent happens to be not all there. It's about 83 issues. The 83rd issue is called Exit, so I'm assuming that's the actual firm end, but by the time you're through the late 70s is when things hit a peak and things seem like it ends. By the time it's all done, you'll be you'll be in love with it probably.
My next story is by the same author of the first manga. That name again is Masaya Hokazono. I think it's Hokazono. And this one was also 2016. Right. This one's definitely more recent. This one is also one that had a cult following, and I've sort of been loosely aware of. Pumpkin Night, and that's night spelled N-I-G-H-T. So sort of an allusion to, or sort of alluding to, like Halloween, Pumpkin Night. The story is about this girl. Let me get her name again. Yeah, the story is about this girl Naoko. If you look, or Naoko? I think it's Naoka. If you look up Pumpkin Night, the first result is Pumpkin Night Naoka, and it's a pretty popular person to cosplay. Like if you look it up on social media, you'll see people cosplaying her at hashtags. It's sort of like an underground cult classic, because I see a lot of these cosplays and I see a lot of allusion to it, but there's no like big YouTube videos about it or anybody really talking about it. So I felt the need to bring it up because it's really like an instant classic, from the design of the character to the way it's laid out. And it's sort of a modern thriller, because the way it works is this girl will friend request you. It'll say Pumpkin Night's added you or followed you, like on Instagram, where you don't really have a choice. That's like the initial plot. Like you first see that this person has done this, and like it's them stalking you and killing you, and her weapon is this like knife with it's like a pumpkin carving knife. It has a scoop on one end and a knife on the other. And if you go to one of my pictures here, she really just like takes the other end of the knife and like scoops out your brains or like cuts out your eyes or whatever. And it's a very very intense and gory kill. This guy has written a lot of really gory stories, but this is probably intermediate amounts of gore. She's pretty relentless. Being a teenage girl, she has like a really insane amount of energy, so she'll like climb buildings after you, she'll like ride on motorcycles or mopeds, and she's a ruthless killer in that like if the cops stop her, she'll just kill the cops. It's Japan, so like they don't have guns typically. She'll just like mow them down with her knife or whatever.
And
she's pretty horrifying, because she'll like sort of do the Michael Myers thing too, where she'll like stand like on a building or like somewhere like a little bit away so you can see her, but by the time you can like tell anyone or like get after her, she's gone. She's just like watching you from a distance in that big pumpkin mask. She's also got kind of like this cutesy emo aesthetic, which is why I imagine she's popular with like girl cosplayers, because she's like has a lot of fun with it, and she's got this like bubbly personality, even though she's a killer also.
Yeah, I definitely get that.
But the story of this character, which you learn pretty quickly, is that she's like she was bullied in school, and it sort of culminated in these bullies like blowing up. Like every fall they have a school dance, and the winner, the queen, gets elected and gets this pumpkin put on their head, but they elected her as a joke because they bullied her, and like filled the pumpkin with fireworks and just like blew up her face and like smoked her fucking face off.
Oh fuck.
And they think she's dead, but she's now come back, and she's like wearing the mask as like a badge of honor to like kill the bullies and like kill all these like horrible people. So sort of like a classic slasher villain, she's out to kill the people that hurt her and sort of made her backstory, but she does kill many other people on the way, and there's a lot of colorful characters. I get the impression that at this point in the author's career, having written a lot of things, he's not afraid to get goofy. Like the screenshots you see of Donald Trump in the story for some reason. He's like one of the characters' dads. But that goofiness just makes it really campy, and the campiness makes it really fun, and the character is really funny, and it's great. It's like a instant classic slasher because it's got all the elements, and it's got like a solid story, and it's got a great design. But I think what makes it stand out and makes it a lot of fun to read is it's really fast paced. The guy releases chapters like every year around this time, so it's only like 4 years old now, but now it's like
5 volumes
or so. And it's just a great it's like takes place during the holidays. It's like a great Halloween read also, and
totally.
It's a pretty short read again, so I'd recommend it.
Oh yeah, this looks fucking great. I love the aesthetic. I love the way they draw her from the distance, like how she's pursuing this girl with the friggin' knife. And also just the idea she's pursuing them with carving tools, like pumpkin carving tools. That's fucking amazing.
She's also like unkillable, like a lot of slashers are. Like the people that are bullies, obviously since they like blew her face up, they're kind of relentless and awful themselves. So like when she tries to kill them, she's a little girl, so the bullies are like these big guys, and they're like, it's fine, we'll just like steal her knife and like stab her and like cut the shit out of her and then like leave her there to die.
Right.
But then she just comes back covered in scars and is like still after them because they can't kill her.
Yeah, and I can see from this one panel where she's dancing around her abode, like the way her face has been distorted. It's, oh man.
Yeah, you have like a colorful cast, you've got a good character design villain, and you've got a lot of comedy, and it's really short, so I'd recommend reading it. I'd say it sticks out. Like, I will remember this one for a while, and it's got a cult following for a reason, so probably get some new chapters here soon, too, for the holidays.
Alright, so the other one that I want to discuss was another manga by Shuzo Oshimi. It was released in September of 2009 and ran until May of 2014. And it's called Aku no Hana, also known in English as Flowers of Evil. And this is one of Oshimi's work that's actually is well known. Well, sort of. I haven't heard a lot of people talk about it, but it was good enough they got an anime adaptation, and it also got, from what I've read of other people's interpretation of the story, it seems like it's a lot more well-known than Trail of Blood. But nonetheless, it's about a boy named Takao, and he's a bookworm. He's always reading. He's your stereotypical, like, literature geek. And he really likes this book named Flowers of Evil by Charles Baudelaire. And Flowers of Evil is essentially this French book of poems by Charles Baudelaire that tackles individualism and how society is kind of really one note, and it's about how everyone in society is very conformist and how color and creativity kind of ends up bending over for conformity eventually. And how that ties into the story is Takao is this, he's the idea of what a conformist is. He's just this no frills about him literature geek, just getting good grades, going through school. He has two classmates that are central characters to the story. One is Nanako, who is his crush. She's the girl everyone is in love with. She's very pretty, very normal herself, but because she's pretty, that's what makes her stand out. And then there is the titular character Nakamura, who is this other girl who sits behind him. She wears glasses in school, and she is just an absolute fucking delight. She is such a crass and disgusting and fucking upsetting person. Here, I will share with you her introduction when she first speaks, her first lines in the manga, and that will tell you everything you need to know about her character.
Shut it, fuckface. How dare you call your teacher a fuckface?
The teacher is just giving roll call and she calls him a fuckface.
He's about to frickin' knock her out of space.
Yeah, he has to like catch himself. You can tell like he's put up with this shit from her for a while and he's sick of it. We're introduced to these three characters as the center pieces of the story. And one day, Takao, as everyone has left school, he's gone back to retrieve his books because he forgot them in his classroom. And he sees Nanako, his crush's fucking dirty gym clothes in her fucking locker, but the locker is open and all that mess. Nice. And again, he's a very normal kid. There's nothing like, he's never had any kind of devious thoughts or anything. No one thinks ill of him. But of course, he sees his crush's fucking gym clothes, and all of a sudden he is just completely enamored, and he ends up stealing her gym clothes from the friggin' class and bringing them home.
Oh, no. He just took a very specific fetish.
Yeah, exactly. Now, he didn't do anything with them, he just stole them because he was enamored by them, and when he gets home, he's immediately guilt-ridden, he feels like shit. All he's done is steal clothes, but of course he's a very normal kid, he doesn't have anything. He feels like shit when he ultimately, all he did was steal some clothes, but again, he's a guy, so that would still look pretty bad in his situation. But he's scared, so he doesn't return them immediately. So the next day, of course, everyone's freaked out because it's become a big thing. The principal's asking where the clothes are. The girl Nanako is like crying because like what pervert would steal a girl's clothes and all that mess. And everyone's making jokes about like what the person could be doing with the clothes and all that crap. And of course the usual like middle school shit you would expect, the pettiness and all that stuff. But because no one knows who took them and he didn't leave any clues behind, there's not really anything they can do. Just the clothes got stolen, just get new ones, and all's light as rain. But as he's leaving that day, all of a sudden Nakamura stops him and he's like, "What's up?" And she was there in that classroom under the teacher's desk, and she saw him steal the clothes that day.
Oh no.
Exactly. And she gives him this look, and it's so iconic, this look she gives him, and it really sets the stage again for who she is as a person and what she does to him throughout the entirety of the manga, and I'll share it right now.
I love her.
Yeah, she's a great character. Like, her friggin' design, her face, that face right there is so perfect.
I hope they become friends. That's very funny.
But, so, now that she knows that he did this shit, she makes him do things for her. Like, for example, she'll make him vandalize stuff. She'll make him just do all these shitty things. He actually, Takao, he manages to actually go on a date with Nanako, the person he stole the clothes from, and she makes him wear her gym clothes under his normal clothes while on this date.
Oh my god.
Yeah, and like he ends up pissing Nakamura off because he goes against her wishes and actually tries to, what she wanted him to do was go on this date with the clothes underneath and then break up with her at the end of the date, like reject her. But he actually goes against her and tries to set up another date. And so Nakamura, because she's watching all this from afar, she comes up out of nowhere with a bucket of water and splashes his clothes so that so that her gym clothes are visible from underneath his shirt. Nanako thankfully doesn't notice. He's able to cover himself with his jacket so she doesn't know. But now you kind of get an understanding for her personality. Now, what's scary about this manga, it's not the same kind of fear as Trail of Blood, where there's murder involved and the fear comes in through, psychological horror, where what makes this manga stand out, in my opinion, is the second half of the manga, and that's where the real fear comes in. Now, I'm going to get into some spoiler territory with that just so I can make my point and make it brief, but eventually Nakamura and Takao end up getting together as like a sort of couple. They end up falling for one another because we find out that Nakamura, the reason she started being more close to Takao and the reason that she wanted him to do all these things is because she feels alone in their society ever since she moved there, because she's very outgoing and outlandish and perverse, but everyone else is super conformist and normal and sensitive.
Classic Haruhi Suzumiya.
There you go. And, but when she saw Takao steal those clothes, she felt like maybe there's someone there who's like her, but like is just under wraps, and so she makes him do all these things in hopes that she's, she thinks that this is what he likes, and he does actually grow to enjoy doing those things. But nonetheless, one day they go to a festival and they plan to burn themselves alive as well as the stage for that festival.
Oh my god.
Right. It's God.
She plans it, right? Like, why would he plan that?
They both plan it. What happens? this is a very dense manga because you really have to just read it in order to understand the psychology behind all their weird shit, because the way I'm describing it just makes them sound like crazy people, but there's an actual mindset behind it. But nonetheless, they try to go through with this, but they cover themselves with gasoline and tell everyone to fuck themselves on stage. But before they can go through with it, Nakamura pushes him off the stage and attempts to kill just herself.
No.
But of course, in the scuffle where she's pushed him off the stage, it gives the authorities an opening to apprehend her and him. And of course, by now, Nakamura and Takao have been outed for so many vandalisms and stuff that Takao's family decide to move away to a different city because they're gonna be ridiculed by society if they don't. And so they do, and then the second half of the manga is a time skip where he's in high school and he's like grown his hair out. He's become a different person and he's come back to conformity. And he also feels like shit because in the end, Nakamura, this girl he fell in love with and was like pushing him to express himself, ultimately pushed him away and tried to end herself and save his life. So he has this self-hate on top of all this guilt and like questions as to why she saved him. He meets this girl, and of course, because he's filled with all this self-hate, he doesn't really open up to her much. He doesn't even read as much as he used to. He used to be a bookworm, but during the time skip, he straight up says, I haven't read a book in like 5 years or something like that.
Interesting.
Right. But this girl, he finds her at a bookstore, and she's reading Flowers of Evil by Charles Baudelaire, which he used to be in love with. And so when she talks to him about it, he's actually able to geek out again like he used to, and really, you know, express his old feverish kind of love for books and literature, and they connect on that. And we kind of realize that this girl, she's in a society where where everything that was normal about where Takao lived is actually ridiculed and weird over where she lives, because we actually find out she has a whole collection of books, but she never tells people she likes to read because that's looked upon as weird in her part of society. Eventually, Nanako, the girl that he used to have a crush on, he finds her at a festival in present time, and she's grown up and she's gotten with a guy who looks exactly like him, and and of course everything's going great for him right now. Like, he's found somebody, he's kind of found a normality where there used to not be. He's starting over, but then this fucking ghost from the past comes back and reminds him of everything, and he feels like shit. He chose Nakamura over her, so she has a chip on her shoulder, and she literally invites him on a dinner date just so she can tell him the only reason he's with this new girl is because she reminds him of Nakamura.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and then leaves. So she's grown into a really hateful piece of shit by this time. His new girlfriend, sees this and asks him what's up, and of course he doesn't want to tell her all the shit that he's done because, you know, fucking he damn near burned himself alive. What's this girl gonna think of him now? But eventually she talks with him, and eventually he breaks down and decides to tell her about everything about Nakamura. And the next volume opens with this gorgeous montage of him telling her everything without any dialogue. It's really nice, and it has dread. You can tell, like, he doesn't like talking about it, but you can also tell, like, you get the picture.
Yeah.
But, nonetheless, he lets her know, and I'll leave the synopsis at there because the ending is really good. But the theme of this manga that I think kind of skeeves me out is how true it is to today. How we kind of do live in a very conformist society that kind of pushes creativity down, but it's also a kind of a good thing in a sense that letting people express themselves in any way can also be super dangerous, so there's no real right or wrong answer, because we want people to express themselves, but we also don't want them to fucking burn themselves alive and shit like that. And I feel like that's a really good theme that needs to be more realized nowadays, that there isn't a winning side, or right or wrong necessarily. It's just like trying to find what is right in your neck of the woods. Because like I said, what was weird and what was normal and conformist for Takao in his world, just reading, being a good student, is looked upon as weird in his new girlfriend's neck of the woods, where she feels like she has to hide the fact that she likes books and learns and all this stuff.
It sounds really like, I guess like I said at first, it just sounds really sweet. Like, it sounds really like you could get invested into this as a slice of life also.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And again, the horror comes more from the subtext than it does the actual story. Like, it's hard, like, the way I describe this sounds more like a rom-com than it does anything else, but again, when you read it and you really hear, like, when you really analyze it, that's where the kind of dread comes in. There's also another way that it scares you, and that's in the anime adaptation, which looks like this.
Oh, God. No. I have seen that. I've seen that still.
Yeah. Yeah, and look at these! They did this! Why?
Jesus, that looks so bad. She looked so good in the manga. Why did they do that?
Yeah, what the hell?
Oh
they took her, like, signature, like, smirk and just...
Yeah, I've seen this being recommended, and I was like, this looks like shit, but now I actually want to read it. I never would have gotten that out of this.
Right, like, I'm sure the story is fine, but the art style is just so bad, like, you wouldn't be able to pay attention.
That sucks.
And you see that middle panel of Nakamura with the friggin' glasses?
Yep.
Like, that shot of that bored-ass face, that's the exact face she has when she tells the teacher that he's a fuckface.
Oh my god.
So, like, it doesn't even resemble the manga.
Yeah, that's not. She, like... Okay. It's enough dwelling on this. I want to go ahead and do my last one real quick. My last one is...
Go ahead, bud.
My last story is... Berserk. Just kidding. It's actually Franken Fran, which is pretty well popular also. But I love Franken Fran, and it's a bunch of short stories, which typically are pretty hit or miss. I was looking at a bunch of short story collections for this first pick. Franken Fran is a single, I think it's
8 volumes,
series that is all short stories. And later on, the series becomes a little more action shonen because you have characters that are like Grim Reapers and like, not literally Grim Reapers, but like killers, and I don't know. It's not really the same as the early couple volumes, which I much prefer. And what Franken Fran is there was once this well-renowned doctor around the world. He could make anyone... He could save anyone. He could bring them back to life if they were on the brink of death or just, like, had been killed or whatever. But eventually his experiments got so... He became so good at his job that he could save people that had, like, just their eyeballs left or something crazy. Like, people sort of exiled him for, like, his work because it got to the point where they were like, this is playing with God. You can't keep bringing people back like this. You're too good. What you're doing is, like, insane. And that's sort of the vague description you're given. And then it goes to, on his island... There's a rumor that he still lives there all this time later, and so people that are very wealthy will come to him and say, I need you to save someone. Like, that's kind of the crux of many of the earlier stories, that these people from wealthy families or these people that are desperate come to this doctor's island to come and get treatment because they have no other way to save this person. When these people get to the island, they find out that the doctor is now gone, and his assistant, who's this girl, Franken Fran, and Fran is taken up. She's become the main doctor now, and she looks like a Frankenstein with her stitched up face, and we really don't know what she is. She's like half alive, half dead. She's sort of an amalgamation of things.
She kind of gives me Soul Eater vibes with her design. The way her eyes are like square.
There's also a good bit of nudity. There's also a lot of gore. So they go to get help from this doctor who is now Franken Fran. And she's got this personality that she's like, I want to continue the doctor's work. I want to preserve life. So she's all about saving people's lives. And even to the point where she'll come into town sometimes to get groceries, and or I guess she doesn't need groceries, but maybe she does. She comes in town for some reason. And she like sees a car accident or she sees somebody dying or whatever. And she's like, I'm going to save your life for free. Or people come to her with a problem and they're like, please, there's this horrible problem. I need you to help. It could be scientists making discovery of this like huge Lovecraftian creature. It could be there's this like mysticism in the world and these like strange creatures that exist that plays into the weirdness going on in her lab, and she helps out with those. But again, I would say the bulk of the stories are someone is on the brink of death or is dying or they have a strange disease or condition and they come to her to save the day, and she solves these issues in a very monkey paw sort of way. So the example that I like the most in the chapter I would recommend anybody read. I'll send some screens from that right now. This is a great... All these stories have a lot going on, and they're really great, so I'd recommend really any of them, and you can skip around if you'd like. But she finds this man in a suicide forest, and she's going out there to pick brains to study on. She wants to like take people that have killed themselves and like harvest their brains to do research on. And she finds this guy out there. She goes to pick his brain, and when she gets back to the lab, she brings it back to life, and she discovers that he didn't mean to kill himself. And he's like, oh God, why'd you bring me back to life? Why did I die? Please save me. And so she's like, I don't have a body for you. And she can put brains in bodies and do all sorts of insane experiments and make anything happen. Like the doctor, she can save anyone's life regardless. But she puts his brain in a mascot suit. But the mascot suit is like real. It has real skin. It's like a real body this guy's now living in. She's like, don't worry, if you stay in this long enough, I'll find you a body and I'll make you a human eventually. But he's like, I don't have time for this. I hate how I feel in the skin. I have to leave. And he runs away. And he like leaves her lab and he's walking the streets, and this little girl comes up to him and she's like, hey, you're my favorite mascot. And she like shows him a picture of her parents with the mascot, and he's like, oh, okay. And she's like, will you please come play with me? And he's like, okay, well, I'm a mouse mascot now, so sure, I guess. No, I think she's like, please, she's like crying. He's like, okay, I'll come with you. So they go back to her house.
Right.
And she has this abusive stepfather, and she thinks that if she brings the mascot back, it'll make her family whole again. And so she's like trying to bring the mascot there, and he sees this broken home, and he's like, okay, I'll save you, come with me. And so like they go and become friends, and that's all well and good for a little while, but then eventually the police come in and they're like, you can't kidnap this girl, and the dad is with the police, the abusive dad. So seeing that the dad comes back and the mascot's like, okay, and he goes and kills the dad. Like, he has these huge giant mouse paws, so he just like smashes the dad's face in. And
oh my God.
They like bring Fran back to see that this guy's been shot by the police. So like there's this crazy dead mascot body, and there's also this dead person, and they're like, Fran, what did you do? Can you fix this? And she's like, oh, okay, sorry, yeah, I made a human mascot suit, sorry about that. So she goes and takes them back to her lab, and she puts the guy's brain that was in the mascot suit now in the abusive dad's body. And so without telling anyone, she's put this like nice guy's brain in the dad's body, and now the guy really is the girl's father, and they're like a happy family again, and it all worked out.
Oh shit.
So like that was kind of a sweet ending, but also that guy definitely died, and it's kind of fucked up. So like that's a pretty classic Franken Fran story.
Let's see, real quick, I have to say, on this page you shared, the bottom left panel with just this darkened vision of the mouse's face is so fucking terrifying. My God. There's
another scene where he first starts talking, and you see like his face, like you can tell that all the skin on his face is real skin because it like wrinkles up. It's horrifying.
Right.
I was actually hesitant to share a lot of this because it's really, really gory and really, really graphic. I actually read the first two stories for this list and then took a break before finishing this one because I was having nightmares already. I was like, it really messes with me. But some of the stories are sweet. Some of them are really fucked up because it's really just like body horror. But if you can handle that sort of thing, it's really intense, and it's got some really interesting stories. The other one that's a pretty classic example is this artist comes to her because he's losing his vision. So she's like, okay, I'll fix your eyes so you can continue to paint. And once he wakes up, he realizes that she's given him eyes that allow him to see all the color spectrum. And so like it just overwhelms him. And then when he leaves the lab, he discovers that he can see like eldritch creatures, and he's like losing his mind and going insane. Eventually he like meets a fairy in the forest, and like they love each other, and he paints this fairy and shows Fran, and Fran seems to see this fairy and realize that it's like some horrible thing, and they never tell you what the horrible thing he was like marrying was, but that's another interesting monkey paws situation. I tried to stick with ones that weren't too gory, because they're a lot of times she'll just like completely decimate this body or do something horrible. But
like you said, I like this concept how some of her fixes are kind of a monkey paw situation where like she'll fix you, but it still has a price. Like you're getting your life or an important piece of you back, but you're still like it's not entirely free.
Yeah, some of the other characters that are I'm gonna go back up to my screenshots I shared earlier. Some other characters she has that are like in her lab, or like this one girl covered in zippers, and she's like basically got a zipper for every organ, that so this Fran can carry this person with her, and then if she needs like an emergency organ for a transplant, she'll just like unzip this person's leg and pull out something, or like their spleen or whatever. And then there's a guy who's got the head of a person and the body of a cat, and what he'll do is walk around in a human's body, but then if Fran needs a body replacement or somebody who's been like beheaded, he'll climb out of the body, and he's this little like cat dog, and she'll just like put the guy's beheaded head on this body and like sew them up or whatever. Okay, well, thank you for sharing your stories with me. If you, the viewers, have any stories you'd like to share in the comments below, please let us know. You can subscribe for more videos like this or follow us on Twitter. I also post panels from what I'm reading daily on Instagram, if you'd like to follow me there. Most importantly, I'd like to remind you to have a happy Halloween, in this case, and support the manga community however you can. Buy the books, donate to the translators, and remember, you should read what you personally enjoy. Have a good Halloween, everyone.
Have a good Halloween, guys.